I want to welcome everyone who is joining us here today. My name is Mark Atkinson. I am the CEO and co-founder of Mursion. And I am honored to have with me today Professor Joseph Fuller at Harvard Business School. Professor Fuller was the co-founder of the Monitor Group, which is now known as Monitor Deloitte. He's a professor of management practice at Harvard, as I mentioned, and the co-director of the Project on Workforce at Harvard, and serves as the chair of the Board of Trustees of Western Governors University. Professor Fuller, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Mark, my pleasure to join you and your audience. And we've known each other long enough, so I think you can call me Joe.
I will do so then, Joe. Thank you. So we, like other folks, are thinking a lot about where artificial intelligence is changing both the nature of work and specifically the tools and processes by which uh, folks who are running human capital in their organizations are thinking about talent, upskilling, evaluation, performance management, and the nature of work processes themselves. And we're planning to sort of share some themes about what we might expect in learning and development in 2026 around just-in-time modular learning, skills-based development, and AI personalization. AI is so much about the future here, and you've written on this topic quite a bit. In fact, you've talked about how as AI automates routine tasks, the durable skills are really the differentiators in the future. If you had to prioritize three of these human skills that you think are the durable differentiators, which three would you recommend organizational leaders focus on and why?
Certainly an interesting question. I think I would be looking for people that are curious, enjoy learning new things. Strangely, I might also say I'd be looking for someone who's uh, not prone to anxiety, calmness, because the what we see in areas like reskilling workers is particularly those who are well into their careers, let's say mid 40s and beyond in age, often are very reluctant to be challenged to learn new things, doubt their ability to do that. Um, there have been some tech companies that have just run into active resistance. People saying, "Well, I do what I do now pretty well. I just want to continue doing that. I don't really not interested in being responsible for learning something else." So, uh, bestowing that calmness is also very much a feature of management communications. But I would look for, I think I'd be looking for people who are used to uncertainty, not all that roiled by it, and then finally a high capacity for interaction with different types of constituents. In all management jobs, what we're seeing is that social skills, really the ability to modulate, to move from one setting to another and be effective in whatever role you're playing in those different settings is a very, very important skill, given the blurring of boundaries between companies, the lack of confidentiality that companies enjoy about what they do and how they do it, the proliferation of various interest groups that affect companies, could be local community organizations, advocates for various causes, and of course, those same things manifest themselves inside the workforce. So I think curiosity, calm, and sociability, we'll call the latter one, just to make it concise.
We could talk for a long time about all three. I'd love to dive into each of them for just a second around curious, or maybe let's do it this way. Um, these are skills that some people tend to show up with, but I'm betting you also believe that they can be taught. But I want to let you, in other words, if you're looking at folks early in their career, um, do you think organizations should be looking for people who have the potential to have those skills? And if so, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how one might go about assessing them. And from there, I'd love to know how one might go about developing them if you see nascent qualities that you like, but limitations that you want to work on. So just let's go first about ways of assessing them. And if there's examples that you've seen in the world of how organizations look at the assessment of curiosity, of sociability, of the calmness, as you put it, I'd love to talk about how you detect them first.
We're really at the dawn of a new age in our ability to do things like detect skills like that, power skills like that. Historically, there's been very assessment of skills like that has tended to be superficial. Um, I believe most evaluation is ultimately subjective. So I'm not going to say that uh, the standard should be strict mathematical objectivity, but they were very much subject to biases and preferences of the interviewer. I think now, obviously, there are tools that relate to everything from tone of voice to eye movement that people are claiming provide some insight into the qualities and the reactions of interviewees. I think, however, the gold standard here is going to be to use tools like simulation to see how people react to uncertainty, see how people react to naturally react to, let's say, a situation which is a little fraught or something unexpected happens in let's say a meeting setting or a dialogue with a customer. That we haven't had really good tools like that until recently. And certainly they were difficult to make them very lifelike and very effective and gather data from in a multimodal way, the audio data, the visual data, transcript data, is that's really just emerging now. And I think it's going to be a huge unlock because social skills are very hard to teach when they're being done through human to human coaching. And a lot of social skills are developed in childhood and adolescence. And that doesn't necessarily prevent people from improving sometimes markedly, but it really has taken in human to human coaching form a tremendous amount of investment to materially change one's profile, a standard deviation or more improvement. Now I think that's going to be much more realistic, and we can also see something that's exciting about AI in this, which is that the effectiveness of AI generated coaching is almost approaching 100% of the effectiveness of human human coaching. And that seems to be a function of the fact that we all as human beings have certain habits. I'm not going to call them bad habits necessarily, but that let's say I'm a supervisor and I grew up under supervisors who always opened an important meeting by saying what their position was and seeing if anyone else had a different point of view,
Yep.
which is a dreadful way to solicit new ideas, dissent, instill psychological safety, and all the things we know about being an effective leader. So maybe I have that habit and I'm being coached by my supervisor to stop it or to always think about talking last. Well, AI will send me a prompt 15 minutes before a meeting I code as a class one meeting to say, hey, Joe, remember to ask questions. Don't start with your opinion. Signal people that you're interested in their ideas. Ask people who are being silent in the meeting, what do they think? So draw the people on the fringes in. There's your checklist for a successful meeting.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see much more progress in these areas than we ever could have hoped for, relying on, I won't call it stone knives and bear skins, but where we have been.
Yeah, it's absolutely it's fascinating. The realization of these tools is happening at a time when companies are looking to get so much more productivity out of the human capital that they have. And I'm curious if you see examples in the real world of organizations that are driving both operational efficiency, sort of revenue per employee, if you will, while also cultivating these very skills that we're talking about right now, or even domains where you see that being the focus, as AI is just infiltrating everything we do at work right now.
I view that as the efficiency versus abundance um, distinction. That organizations, that the natural stance of organizations when they get a new technology is to ask, how can it make our current processes more efficient? And that's the way, um, certainly the last 20 years of software as a service has been onboarded. But in this instance, I think the tendency to say, you know, how can it fit into our current process is actually, if not destructive, then ill-conceived. This technology is so fundamental to our humans' ability to be productive and is improving, I would say, at a faster rate than most of us who study it anticipated. That really, a company that's asking that question is asking the wrong question. The right question is, how do we transform our process to make AI absolutely central to it, to maximize the impact of AI? That's a very daunting task, because if you start thinking about what AI is going to do in any important process, it's going to require rewriting job descriptions to feature how AI plays in, to rewriting what are called authorities. So what I can sign off for on a manager, re-engineering the process along a totally new set of tools and data flows. So it's intimidating in terms of the extent of change, but it's also a bit scary because you can't just flash cut to a radically new process if it's an important process for the integrity of your service or the products you manufacture. So you're going to have to scale up the new process while keeping the old process in place for a bit. That's actually going to lead to inefficiencies in your cost, not efficiencies. But by committing to do it that way, that's called the J curve effect. While your economics will get a little unattractive for a bit, you've positioned yourself to come flying up the vertical shaft of the J once you've got that new process shaken down. And so I am seeing some companies, most of whom I'm under NDA with, that are being very thoughtful about enduring the J curve costs, but really focusing on overhauling two or three processes that are absolutely essential to their competitive strategy, both because they see an opportunity for an abundance outcome, better on multiple dimensions, just not cost reduction, and also because they are worried, with good reason, that if their cautious about this, if they take a go slow, or we're not having a great quarter, let's defer any expenditure, that they'll suddenly find themselves materially behind a rival that had the resources or the courage to push ahead, irrespective of not knowing entirely what was going to happen, and a kind of not shaky economy, but uneven economy where it's hard to know what's going to happen next. So um, I think we are beginning to see some real progress, and I would say we've seen almost an order of magnitude increase in the interest of senior executives in the last 6 months about what should they be doing. That they're reading things like MIT saying 95% of experiments are failing. They're getting questions from their boards and stock analysts and even customers about what are you going to do with AI, from workers, what are we going to do about AI? So I think maybe we're at the end of the beginning and of the beginning stage here, and ready to move into more action oriented, more thoughtful experimentation, and more risk running.
There's a lot to pick up on. That was a really thoughtful and interesting analysis. I'm wondering, and I don't recognizing company specific examples may be hard to do, but industry specific ones I'm wondering about. And the one that comes to my mind, at least an area that I know you're interested in, and we've done some work in, that gets at curiosity, your calmness, and your sociability, is healthcare. And if you think about where AI is having the most immediate, obviously, AI is having an enormous immediate impact around drug discovery, drug development. But when we think about the focus that healthcare has had around patient experience, and how in a time when we're seeing so much burnout around frontline providers of healthcare, I am curious if you have thoughts about how curiosity, calmness, and sociability, and the elevation and development of those skills can have an impact on patient experience and the providers of healthcare services industry wide.
Well, I think in healthcare, what we see is a system that where we've layered complexity on top of complexity. And so it's just bloody difficult to navigate the system. Everything from what your plan covers to having to move across therapeutic areas, or areas in the hospital. You know, if you're going in for um, a reasonably routine surgery, there are often four different departments: anesthesiology, radiology, internal medicine, if it's orthopedic surgeon or a brain surgery, specialized surgeons. And in most hospitals, the systems are set up by department. Uh, we have still terrible problems, really gratuitously caused errors, because there's information isn't recorded or transmitted in a timely fashion or an accurate fashion or with sufficient specificity. So whether it's AI beginning to overcome some of those problems, or very importantly, helping physicians, nurses, physicians assistants, nurses aides, by unburdening them of lots of kind of gratuitous make work that is exhausting, a distraction, prevents them from doing the essence of their job. So just now, physicians' notes being taken by AI, transcribed by AI, put into the appropriate forms. The ability to answer patients' loved ones' questions more quickly, the ability to set up bots to do the multi-physician scheduling for you.
Yep.
All of those things are not just going to make quality of delivery better. It's going to make quality of work life for the overburdened professionals in the system better. And, I want my physician thinking about my diagnosis, not worrying about getting to the incredible amount of paperwork in their panel of 1,800 internal medicine patients, which is not an uncommon number for an internist now to have to handle, which is frankly a bit ridiculous. And you have some panels that are 3,000.
Yep.
So a panel being the number of patients overseen by that individual personal care physician. So two-headed improvements, and we once again just beginning to unlock it.
Um, you are seeing some of the best and the brightest coming as students to Harvard Business School, pursuing careers in a world that they know is going to be dominated by AI. How open is the current generation to the vision you started to paint before of this idea of a persistent AI coach, a requirement that you demonstrate the capabilities of your curiosity, your calmness, and your sociability, as you put it? Is this a generation that's looking for that and excited to embrace it, or is it a generation that sees it as an encroachment of the power of the enterprise to get inside their head and their psyche and control them in ways that they're resistant to? I'm curious how you see it at HBS.
It's hard to generalize. I mean, we have a very diverse student body in terms of their character and makeup. I would say it's actually both. I think on the whole, our students in our MBA program, who would generally be in their mid to late 20s or early 30s, often have about 4 years of work experience. Um, they with each passing cohort, even, they are more comfortable with AI. They've used it more extensively. They've used it at work. Many are now able to vibe code and to create at least simple tools on their own. We have a new required course for them in these tools. This is running it for the second year this year, and so they're more comfortable with it. They are, I think, on the whole, more cynical might be a strong word, but certainly concerned about the motives of institutions, and concerned about ethical issues that may arise from AI. I certainly get a rise out of them when I do a seminar or have a lunch with students who want to talk about the future of work, and I get a question about bias of AI in evaluating candidates, and my not so funny response is usually, well, bias compared to what? I mean, the current system is riddled with bias. So, and I can't regression test a hiring manager. I can use synthetic data to see if my AI is being biased against any group and to change the settings on the algorithm to try to extinguish or reduce that bias. I think that they're probably less disquieted by the notion of technological advances, and that technology is going to be very important to their careers. But they're deeply concerned that many of the traditional jobs that our students went to out of our program and aspire to build careers in are going to be under threat, displaced by AI, and they've got open question as to what's going to appear in its stead. I'm often asked me, do I believe the school of thought that there are going to be lots of green shoots of spring, lots of new types of jobs that will backfill those positions that are made more dramatically more efficient through AI. And I think my point of view on that is that we're beginning to see some evidence of that, but I'm probably more toward what's called the reallocation theory of AI, that it's going to displace a fair number of people. And AI is the first technology whose efficacy goes up with your income. So if you do a log analysis of percentage of productivity improvement versus annual total compensation, it's almost a slope of one,
Yeah.
tails off at the very end.
Yeah.
So that's whether it's they hope to be in finance and do public equities trading or in consulting or work in high tech sectors, product managers, things like that. They can see that those jobs are going to be materially affected. And I don't think we have. And I don't think it'd be respectful to give them a flip answer that, oh, don't worry about it. It'll all get sorted. It will get sorted over time, but it's going to be over time.
It's a perfect segue into one of your HBS working knowledge papers that I love. It's called as AI upends recruiting. Job seekers need a Waze app for careers. For anybody who doesn't know Waze, we all know it's the navigational system that gets us everywhere these days. I'd love for you to expand on that metaphor and talk a little bit more about how you think about that.
Well, a good friend of mine once said that we actually don't really think all that much about two choices in life: what we're going to do and who we're going to marry. We just kind of fall into that. And, that he finds that kind of humorous, although he says it with great sincerity. And a lot of people's career paths are based on partial information about what's required in a job, about where a job leads, bad luck. They get a job that they really aspire to, and the company gets acquired, and they get laid off, or the company has mismanagement and doesn't perform well. The value of the brand on that resume is eroding. But the biggest problem is mismatches. That people have misimpressions of what the substance of a job is. They have misimpressions about what skills are really required. And then they start pursuing a job that they can find, frankly, they don't really have a lot of aptitude at the skills and the talents that are associated with enduring success in that industry. Or they find out this isn't really what I thought it was at all. Just to illustrate, in my own observation is with my peer group that many of my friends went to law school by default. They weren't going to get a PhD. I went to business school in the 1980s, so for a lot of particularly my women friends, they were like, well, that is that kind of postgraduate studies in sexism. Do I really want to do that? I don't really see myself, working in companies, of course, for huge improvements in the ability of women to advance in large companies in the intervening half century almost. So, but I'm the type of person that goes to law school. I wasn't pre-med. I'm not going to get a PhD. I don't want to go to business school. I guess I'll go to law school. Now, unless you're a litigator or in family law, I hope you like writing term papers because that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And if you've never been a paralegal or a summer intern, if you're one of your parents or uncles or aunts or, best friends' parents were attorneys who could really take you to work for a day and tell you what it was like, all of a sudden you've got a law degree and you find out that you were happy to get out of college because you were sick of writing term papers.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah.
So AI is going to do all sorts of things. It's going to solve, in the United States, a very severe taxonomy problem where we don't have a standard set of terms for skills in the United States like they do in Germany or Switzerland or Denmark, where they have very strong work-based learning apprenticeship type programs, um, where industries meet and agree on terms and agree on the trajectory of change in tasks and what will be viewed as a acceptable credential to employers and inform the skills providers, mostly educators of that. AI can look at 15 different job descriptions from 15 different companies and understand that in one company, a program director is the same as a project manager, and a second company is the same as a project supervisor as a supervisor in a fourth company, and see what relate those tasks, particularly now that we're dealing with transformers in our context windows rather than just guess the next word tools. It's going to let educators be much more adept at understanding demand, because you'll get AI supported web scraping for how job descriptions are changing. It's going to make companies much more astute about skills mobilization. You have companies like a company I keep my eye on is one called TechWolf, Belgium-based AI that creates a inventory of your company's skills and does skills forecasting and relates those two things, so that you can get a much better vision of where you may have an upcoming skills deficit or where you may have a pocket of skills that are being underutilized.
Yep.
Most people's jobs, they're working on the most important project in their mind of their supervisor.
Yep.
But there could be a peer supervisor down the hall that's working on a much more important project from the employer's point of view, but just simply because Mark doesn't work for me, I don't have access to his skills. Well,
Right.
Company getting Mark on the right project at the right time. Notice how this is also a great example of how current processes will gum up the works until they're reworked to accommodate AI. Because if I was your supervisor and some AI told me, or my boss's boss told me, send Mark, go work for Jane for 6 months, I'd be saying, I want budget relief. I don't want to do the PD. I don't want to do the professional development review. I want to be able to hire a substitute. I want relief from my performance goals.
Right.
So the big companies have spent 50 years honing these processes, make them incredibly lean, sometimes to the point of anorexia, and they're not nimble and they're very brittle, and they've got tremendous kinetic energy. So you can't act like you're gonna overcome all that established way of doing things without a significant intervention.
Yes. And even when you can project the skills of the future that you need in different roles, to go back to your three big ones on the durable skills, my curiosity, my calmness, and my sociability, the behavior change that's necessary for me as I'm using your new Career Ways app down the road and advancing my career, those are not one and done skill development efforts. This is
Right.
a and that's a mindset shift change, I think, for a lot of CHROs. I mean, like, what do you think it takes to get organizations to think that we're going to be working on those? Our best people are going to excel at those things, and we're going to be cultivating and developing them over the course of their career. It's not as though they're ever going to get perfect. As much as you and I recognize them, I'm sure we both, I'll speak for myself, know that there are elements of this that we're constantly attending to and working to in our own careers. Do you see that mind shift of a kind of permanent commitment or a long-term commitment to building that muscle in the people that have the most potential?
Yes. I would say uh, it's in companies where there's a very close alignment of key operating managers and the human resource function. So and it's I'll parse what you said a little bit. It's how to give people pathways to realize their highest and best use in the company. So not necessarily most potential, but the biggest impact each individual can have. Uh, I think that there are. Um, uh, it's interesting, but I would say that there are private companies like Koch Industries and HEB, the big grocery store chain in Texas, that are um, further advanced on this type of thinking, because I think they are more likely to actually view human assets as assets. I've always thought that the phrase human assets was a bit of a fraud because companies talk about, oh, we've got human assets and people are our most valuable asset, but they're treated as expenses, to be either not invested in, to be dispensable in a downturn, um, and whatnot. So, and I think we've got challenges in certain industries. I would say high-end financial services. I would say most professional services firms that the current generation seems to be more or less unprepared to accept the trade-offs that maybe their parents or much older siblings or cousins did in terms of intrusion of work into personal life, sacrifices of their personal life to advance their careers.
Yeah.
And so this is going to require some rethinking. Happily, AI is singularly good at doing routine cognitive work. So a lot of the types of tasks that younger people in those types of industries find most frustrating, discouraging, gratuitously time consuming. Take a banking analyst building yet another model of the same transaction. Well, now that can be done by AI through, in some instances, verbal commands, as opposed to I'm going to have to go in and check all the math myself and change the variables and be here all night yet again.
Yep.
So once again, weight and counterweight, but the progress is uneven and very, very much a function of the way leadership is defining their objectives.
Yeah. I'd love to build on those private company examples you were sharing and put you in the position of the CHRO who's come from one to a more public company that has a more traditional view of human assets, as you put it. And let's talk about ROI. You're the CHRO that's come from one of these private companies, and you now find yourself in a public company, and you're sitting down with the CFO, who basically has that somewhat antiquated view of human capital that you're concerned about. Talk to me about what are the core arguments of ROI on building these durable skills. What do you say to that person? And if you could, even generally, how would you make the argument they should measure ROI for investing in durable skills?
This is, in some ways, the El Dorado for CHROs. The shining city on a hill. The historically companies, starting with the CHRO, have been held further investment in human assets to, I would argue, an unreasonably high burden of proof of efficacy. But there are several drivers here. We know that workers at all levels, you can reduce the rate of voluntary and involuntary turnover through improving their skill set. And turnover is very expensive. Even for the lowest wage workers, replacing a worker costs about a third of their annual salary. And when you get to high level white collar workers, you can be talking multiples of their annual salary. So you have to recognize that if you've got a company which has 40, 50, 60% turnover rates in certain job classifications in which they employ a lot of people, you're running up a hidden bill of a lot of money.
Yeah.
Similarly, we know that people who are invested in are more engaged, they're more productive, they provide better customer service. So we can't act as if these are independent phenomena.
Okay.
The quality of, we've done some research, which we're about to publish here at Harvard Business School, about how supervisors of low wage, medium wage, and high wage workers believe those three levels of workers define a good job and how those workers actually define a good job.
Huh. Okay.
And we find is, particularly as you get more senior in large companies, you have a very tenuous grasp on how lower wage workers and to some degree middle wage workers actually evaluate their willingness to take a job and their willingness to stay in that job.
Hmm.
And so we did that research, Mark, specifically to start trying to elevate this conversation to a more data-rich one.
Yeah.
Now, no CEO, no CFO, no CHRO likes to say, we don't provide a very good job experience, and that's okay with us. So I very often find in talking to executives about the environment they provide for workers, the investment they make in workers, they will speak in pretty extreme negative terms about the labor market, about skills availability, about the prospects for their industry to keep up with the requirements of the future in terms of talent, but then pivot when I ask about their company, and they invariably use the same phrase. Oh, Joe, I think we're doing great because we're a preferred employer. We find regularly that senior executives, I don't disbelieve their sincerity when they say that to me, but they often confuse we have a policy with what they're actually implementing.
Yeah.
So they'll say, "Oh, we have a policy that supervisors need to provide clear and actionable feedback to the people they supervise at least twice a year." They don't, however, let's say you're in a advanced manufacturing setting, they're at the 2 weeks a year when the production schedule is reduced by 50% because it's feedback week. So, and if you're a supervisor of a machining cell in advanced manufacturing, you've got 18 to 24 people that work for you.
Yeah.
So I'm supposed to find 9 to 12 hours twice a week. Oh, and by the way, I've been to several mandatory compliance training that's effectively told me that I'm always at, one sentence away from saying something that is a violation of company policy, going to be viewed as viewed as offensive, prejudicial, and I in no way want to act like those aren't real concerns. But if you tell a supervisor, you're better off keeping your mouth shut, and you're then telling them, oh, by the way, miraculously find time to have hard conversations with people in 30-minute slots.
Yeah.
The universality and the quality of that feedback is going to be highly uneven.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. There's it seems to be a common misnomer or a misunderstanding of a compliance culture versus a contributory culture. And we see even organizations that are trying to improve the processes and quality of the daily feedback they're giving to teams not just as a way of talking, getting people down to sort of share the vision from top to bottom of the organization, but for the bottom to be able to tell the leadership up the pyramid where their assumptions are wrong because they're talking to customers, they're interacting with product, that sort of thing. That I feel like we mislabel this as a sort of policy compliance thing when in fact we human assets become incredibly powerful when they tell us things that we don't know about our own product and service
Yes. Yep.
fundamentally. Is that
Yep.
fair?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, this is the essence of the whole concept of psychological safety, and uh, talk about a skill you can acquire. You can be taught how to greatly improve the level of psychological safety in your unit, in your team, in your corporation by uh, disciplines of the mind, how I ask questions, who I ask questions, when I reveal my opinion. And one of my closest collaborators and dearest friends on this faculty is Amy Edmondson, who is the most noted scholar in that discipline. And we taught a course together for the better part of 10 years, and that was an integral part of the course. The uh, there's just a general discipline of the mind in management, which is a curiosity and a openness to disconfirming data,
Yeah.
seeking it actively,
Yeah.
uh, being very conscious of assumptions underlying your actions about another person, about the way the market works, about how a competitor thinks. I regularly tell my students that at the essence of every failed strategy is a faulty assumption. It could be about our skills, it could be about the timing of the market, lots of things. And I'm not saying that people should be held to the standard of infallibility.
Yeah.
Um, Amy has a very interesting concept called intelligent failure,
Hmm.
where you structure experiments in ways that even if you fail, you've learned a lot, and learning a lot should be celebrated.
Yeah.
Now, if you fail by bankrupting the company, that would be not qualify as an intelligent failure. But so there's certain kind of rules of the road for intelligent failure, but it's a really valuable concept.
Um, as you know, we think a lot about simulation and simulation as a mechanism for practice and learning. And we think one of the hallmarks of really powerful and impactful and educative simulation is psychological safety. I'm curious, as you think about frontline to the most executive leadership, what are the other key attributes that you think great simulation has to have in order to build these durable skills that we've been talking about today?
Well, I think a big one is some randomness, some variability, that that everything can't kind of go as expected and as scripted. Um, I think there has to be some subtlety to points. I think they have to be um, ideally have some capacity to be tuned to your best understanding of the participant's specific profile. So if you and that could be derived from Myers-Briggs type analysis. But if you've got, let's just keep it simple, if you've got introvert, the simulation should recognize that. And if the development challenge for that person is to be more comfortable making their point of view known, about interjecting themselves in a situation, um, uh, we can turn up the heat on that. And if we've got an extrovert, maybe we should have some more unexpected consequences of being too quick to act, or too overly familiar with someone or something like that. So and once again, I think all of this comes together very nicely. Going back to our CHRO conversation, pretty soon CHRO is going to have tools not only to assess their current skills base and make some forecasts of what they're going to need, but assess their current talent base and be able to do things like isolate what are characteristics of people who've been outside successes in this job. How can I backcast that onto my recruiting pool? Oh, and by the way, AI, go and here are 5 companies, 2 of which I compete with directly, 2 of which or 3 of which are other big employers where we're located. I want to understand their talent profile. I want to understand what they're looking for. For our competitors, I want you to highlight differences between what's in their job postings and in my job postings. I mean, it'll be going to from checkers to maybe even 3-dimensional chess, Dr. Spock chess. That is we're going to have, we talk about AI and its future relative to personalized medicine. It's going to be more applicable faster for personalized human development than it will be for humanized medicine, for personalized medicine.
I mean, that couldn't be more exciting. And I think I want to go back then and maybe end on, and this is truly speculative here, what I'm asking, but to go back to your Waze app and your comment about your friend making the observation that the least considered decisions we make are our career and our marriage partner. And now imagine those folks who, as you were describing, the law student who only discovers that writing briefs is going to be what they're going to be doing for the rest of their life, well into the process. So much of what young people are looking for is a sense of what is it like to work here? How do we, and employers are looking for people that show up with these durable skills in addition to technical knowledge. I just wonder if there is a way through AI and technology and simulation in part that we can give them a window into what the culture, what the work really is like. That
Yes.
we situate the assessment of their skills in the interviewing contest in what it's like to be in this professional services firm, this law firm, this manufacturing
Yes.
firm, this PE firm. Can you imagine a world where that's possible?
Yes. And I think it can be done through tools like simulation. I think being able to not only put situations in front of people that are task specific, if those simulations can be tuned for cultural values, that's the upper right hand cell in the matrix. That's where you'd want to be, because that would be the most genuine thing. As you mentioned in your introduction, I used to run a large strategy consulting firm, which is now the strategy practice of Deloitte, the professional services titan. And we used to compete with firms like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Bain and Company. And my students still believe that I know something about consulting. It's a little charming, although I do have a lot of friends who are very senior in the industry and keep track of it. Those are very different places to work, even though they compete with each other.
Yeah.
And it's not that one's good and the other's bad. They're just different.
Yeah.
And I'll have students, I'll literally, under my breath be saying, you are a lead pipe cinch, perfect BCG person. But I don't want to, I have friends at BCG, but I have a son who's a partner at McKinsey.
Yeah.
So, and I once worked at Bain. So I have loyalties with all the dogs, circling each other in the fight. But just because they compete doesn't make the work experience the same. And if we can get to that level, AI is going to be able to ingest interviews of 50 or 100 or 150 people who work at all levels of any one of those firms. And through that dialogue, begin to get a sense for that culture. And in a pressure situation, how people have been influenced by their work history there to react, and play that into recruiting, simulations, right now those firms all basically require you do a case study or two.
Yeah.
Increasingly, that involves AI tools, but that's where they're trying to simulate person to person how this person thought about something, and did they approach it in a sensible way. And it turns out that's a very blunt instrument. It doesn't it often excludes potentially very high performing consultants because they overthink something, or they made a foolish error, or they didn't understand a word, they read too quickly, and they wouldn't make that same mistake on a recurring basis.
Right.
Of course, a lot of these case studies are available now on the web, and students go to things like Glassdoor and post the questions they got asked, and it's hard to keep it real time. Let's put it that way. So, but it's this. I mean, last thing just to mention is AI is bombarding entrepreneurs and investors with market signals about where to take this thing. And as it gets more and more capable, we're going to see people looking for those moments of truth, those pain points for customers, and using these tools, embedding these tools in solutions that are going to be highly appealing and much more auditable because of the way the tool works, and more and remarkably, this is a tool that learns on its own. And it doesn't matter if it's a large language model or a small language model, it gets better at what you ask it to do with reps, just like you do in the gym.
Yeah.
And so the prospect of a productivity unlock, a quality of work life unlock, and I think, innovative solutions to a lot of societal problems eventually.
Yeah.
Big transition period
Yeah.
in the next few years. But in the long term, I'm very, very optimistic about the potential of this technology as we're coming to understand it, to make people happier, more productive, and more fulfilled, because those matching problems can get greatly reduced.
I couldn't agree with you more. Joe, it was a real privilege and pleasure to spend an hour with you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Mark, I definitely enjoyed it, and always look forward to hearing your podcasts.
Next time, we'll be back together soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.